Hello, everybody, and welcome to your post-daily news show for Friday, March the 11th. I am John Pollock alongside Mr. Wai Ting. It is Friday. Hello, Wai.
It is Friday. It is a snowy Friday here in
What's
Toronto,
going on?
John.
Like,
I don't
what is
know,
going
dude.
on? Sunday, dude, I was like outside in shorts, and now there's snow coming down. Just unbelievable.
I had my gardening tools ready. I was ready to pot some plants or whatever people do in the
Oh,
spring. And here comes another pound of snow. Relentless, this
well,
country.
Well, we've got a snowfall's worth of news to get to on today's show. We'll be looking ahead at the weekend coming up. But off the top, we have yet another special guest this week joining us now from the Business of Business Wrestling Podcast over at SEScoops.com. We are bringing in Lavie Margolin to chat a plethora of business stories going on in professional wrestling. Lavie, how are you doing today?
Hey guys, I'm doing great in New York. It's crisp but pleasant. So just going with the flow.
You know, Lavi, in just getting all your plugs ready here, as we'll get to at the end. I was astounded at just how many books you have written. I am aware of like the Trump Mania book, but you've written quite a number of books. One of which I will say is going for Amazon for like over $700. By the way.
Oh yes, and I think that was my LinkedIn book, and somebody had
Yes.
contacted me, and they said they wanted to buy it, and I was like, please don't. That's out of print. Maybe I could get you the PDF, but besides my passion and interest in the wrestling business, I'm a career professional, higher ed person by trade, I guess you could say. So I've written a number of career books, most of which centered around interviewing. People liked winning answers to 500 interview questions. I think it's that like 500 number. That seems exciting.
Well, you're putting a lot of pressure on us, but I hope we passed the Lavie Margolin grade. And I wanted to bring you on because I mean, you and your co-host John Paz, for those unfamiliar, the Business of the Business podcast. Can you just chat a bit about it? You launched it over a year ago, and sort of finding like this area of the business that of the wrestling business that I think it's a growing audience that is seeking this kind of information that you guys dive into, and it really dovetails what we're going to discuss about Ring of Honor today.
No, you're right. And of course, Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics and Post Wrestling is really an inspiration, along with his former co-host, the founder of WrestleNomics, Mookie, of course, of AEW, and just the type of reporting from Post Wrestling and different great outlets has really inspired me, and it's kind of fun to like dig deeper. I think, especially when you're covering so much news, WWE, AEW, and at times New Japan could dominate. So I think there's a lot of fun niches to look into. And when you follow it like on a consistent level, it tells stories and things get threaded that you can look back on.
You've done extensive coverage of Ring of Honor over the years. So when the announcement came last Wednesday about Tony Khan's intent to purchase the company, was this something that was you saw as the next kind of step for Ring of Honor, that a sale would make logical sense for someone to pick up? Was this a surprise to you, given a lot of the questions that have surrounded ROH since last fall when the announcement was made about contracts that would not be renewed?
No, it's actually interesting. Presciently, John had titled the previous episode before the announcement was made. I think the episode dropped that morning that Ring of Honor sold to AEW at the time we were supposing, but that was more speculation. It just became the title, and then later we came back to reflect on it. But it was, whenever something like this happens, it is a surprise. And one of the things that's, coming out more, but I noticed at the time, there has yet to be a Sinclair Broadcasting press release
Right.
or filing. So it's not over till it's over. Having done a little deal that didn't come to too much fruition with Trump Mania, with Hollywood lawyers and that sort of thing, I know with lawyers, it takes forever. So kind of the feeling was that Tony Khan probably wanted to get this announcement out there with something interesting to say, but it might have been a little bit ahead of its time. Hopefully it doesn't go the way of the Fusion Media type deal for WCW, but that's something. But assuming that it goes through, again, it's surprising, but not so much, given the state of Sinclair. So there's some overarching stories, some of which I feel should be dispelled and some of which I think hold true. I don't think the part where they maintained payroll during the pandemic was sort of the main spark or even a top one. My theory is that Ring of Honor actually saved money during that time. Because if you look at what the revenue drivers are since the Elite left, since Cody Rhodes left, it wasn't house shows, it wasn't pay-per-views, it wasn't merchandise at the shows. It was really, they're given about 3 minutes of ad time on the Sinclair networks to sell advertising. So your costs you could keep down when you do less expensive tapings. So here they were able to get off the road. They didn't have to do these house shows or Honor Club exclusives that were, I would suppose, money losers. Whereas, you could just have the tapings. You don't have to have ticket takers. You don't have to have security. The shows would have been well attended. And, there's the cost of the hotel and the testing where everyone was secluded for a while, especially once they first came on the road. But the same amount of people with maybe a modest variance that are casual watchers in Sinclair's universe. Maybe the high school football game ended, the local news is about to start. In between its Ring of Honor, there's not, huge swings. It has like a consistent, what was it announced as like somewhere between 300,000 to 500,000 over the years. So, but I think when looking back on it, one of the first clues to me was when WOW Wrestling was announced as coming to Sinclair, sort of to supplement the CBS syndication. And when I think about it, it's like, how much wrestling does Sinclair need or want? So that was one of the first things. And finally, sorry, I'm on like a runaway train here. No. Finally, there was the hack. And that, I think in their quarterly report, they announced that as like $50,000 to $60,000 loss. So if it's Ring of Honor, that has been reported as up to 40 million, maybe that makes up for some of it.
Knowing what you've heard from Tony and maybe from some of the reporting that's out there, what is your feeling on how Ring of Honor will operate once he does acquire the ownership?
Yeah, so I think there's sort of the aspirational way that it will run, and then there'll be sort of the way that it might turn into. Of course, as has been talked about so much, Tony Khan does have the resources, but he's not going to just spend if there's no light at the end of the tunnel. I think there is a genuine plan to have it run at some sort of consistent basis. They don't even do house shows for AEW, so something where there would be regular tapings. I think it would sort of depend on what type of distribution they receive. I don't imagine that they would remain with Sinclair, although, if something could be worked out, I think that would be something of value actually to AEW, the Prime brand, because it's a different form of distribution, different fans that you can reach. But whether it becomes a streaming show, something through the Warner Media empire, or owning another brand that, has no contractual or exclusivity ties to Warner Media, you can sort of kick the tires around. So if they find that stability, sort of it can run throughout. Otherwise, you sort of get that interpromotional feud that we've seen so many times. You get to keep the names of certain shows. I know Tony seems to like a lot of branded programs, so you could use Final Battle and some other titles that people are familiar with to keep it interesting week to week on Wednesday nights, if that's what it ends up being.
To me, the biggest question is what you brought up, and that's the distribution. I think that's such a big part of the equation that we are still left with an unknown. And with regards to Sinclair, like, it brings about, if you are Tony Khan, you are buying this product with the hope of this being something that you can strike a big kind of rights deal for. And Sinclair was in a position where they own this thing outright. They earmarked the budget for Ring of Honor, but they had this programming, and it would seem to be, a big shift for all of a sudden they are going to be paying for programming. But in terms of just the syndicated model, do you think that's feasible in today's landscape? Like, we have seen Ring of Honor try to build its business for 11 years on this syndicated model. Can it still be viable for a pro wrestling entity in 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, it's certainly challenging. I don't see it as the primary model. Syndication on television. Certainly, you have those legacy programs that seem to still do tremendously well, like Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy and all those sort of things. But for pro wrestling, you probably haven't had a big go at syndication since even 2000 might be stretching it just because of the type of syndication that WCW had, for example, and WWF had. Um, if somebody was to sort of like put more resources in it, it might make more waves, but I don't think that's the way to go. But if it were to be like supplemental, like I mentioned, you have these casual viewers in Ohio and West Virginia or wherever that Sinclair has its strengths, that it sort of expands the brand.
Do you feel like, there's a level of rehabbing that needs to be done for the Ring of Honor branding? How much of Tony, how much of the current Ring of Honor does Tony keep around? And if you were just speaking as a fan, what would you like to see him do with his first set of shows whenever that happens?
Yeah, I think in terms of the way that they're using the brand, they already seem like they're on the right path in terms of understanding, almost like focusing on the core years that a lot of people might not have seen, experienced live, certainly, or even experienced via DVD or streaming. But sort of like it's that mindset, and you have the players there where you could almost like skip over elements that you don't control, and certainly the last few years, which many people weren't watching actively, if not passively, but where you have those core years, the years that I was a fan. So what would I like as a fan? It's actually interesting because Ring of Honor as a live experience brought me back to pro wrestling, sort of like the Katie Vick stuff, end of, sort of like that tough end to the Attitude Era. Like I was like the biggest fan in the world, obviously, but then dropped it. And then I would still subscribe to the newsletters and I'd hear Ring of Honor. So when there was a bus trip to New Jersey, I think it was Jushin Liger was there, and like I was immediately hooked and was no longer interested in really like watching DVDs anymore, but like to go and experience that in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. So what would I like to see from the brand? That's a tough question because yes, it's fun to see nostalgia for a while, like when we look back on our favorite periods. But like, if Jim Crockett Promotions had continued, or the that NWA iteration, it wouldn't still be what we loved about it. It would be some version of what it would be now, years later. So it's sort of finding that footing. Probably the best chance for it to survive and thrive is like be an island unto itself. It's always hard for the main brand to resist like plucking, like before the bread is cooked, like the top looks good, so you pull a little bit off the top of the cake or something like that. Sort of like leave it on its own if it can be financially sustainable on its own for a while. When you bring it in and stars appear or you have interpromotional matches, it makes it special.
So much of what you described about, I mean, what drew you to Ring of Honor in the first place is essentially what AEW is today. And so it kind of makes you wonder, how does he prevent this from simply being, like a B league, unless that's the intent? Or does he, go more towards something that makes Ring of Honor unique, whether it be the pure rules or something else about it?
Yeah, no, I was thinking back on this, and especially like before Tony Khan had started up AEW, when he would do some interviews and it was announced that it was coming, I'd sort of think about what would this be, and he would often reflect on what his favorite wrestling was, or different time periods. And first of all, I know he watched Global, so that was bonus points on that. But I don't think he's gonna like go back to the Global Dome, unfortunately. But obviously his passion for WCW comes through in AEW, and the second promotion, which he's talked about, like asking for to attend the arena with his father for a birthday present, was the ECW arena. So I don't think like a revival of ECW is a good idea, and I think he knows that too. But like, if WCW, it lives on like sort of like in the bones, the DNA of AEW, maybe ECW lives on in Ring of Honor. that's sort of its roots from where it grew from. I wouldn't say like all the worst of ECW, but sort of that like passion and enthusiasm. Maybe you go towards like the type of venues where the fans are on top of the arena. Sort of like if you believe left or right is viable. So like keep going the other way. Like try and make it different from AEW so it has a different feel to it.
Also, this week you were writing about Impact Wrestling, and that's a very, I think, like a side-by-side comparison with Ring of Honor, given the proximity of both companies launching 20 years ago, and in a post ROH Sinclair world, at least under that ownership. Where do you see Impact sort of in the marketplace right now? And as well, comparing tape libraries, that here you have 20 years of content on both sides in a world where content is extremely valuable.
Yeah, so I think the first most important thing to contextualize, which a lot of people don't talk about, but like when you go to like Moody's or something like that and you see what acquired what company, it lists that Anthem was purchased by Northern Pacific Group. This is a Minnesota investment company. For example, they have 10, they're not a huge company, but they have 10 companies in their portfolio, one of which, Pipeworks, they sold, I think, 2 years ago for $100 million. So sort of their idea, as I understand it, is sort of like you acquire a company, you either rehabilitate it or you give it an infusion of money to grow. And then, eventually you want to see a return on your investment, which whenever I talk about that, there's still a lot of passionate TNA Impact fans that don't want to hear that. So if I was Northern Pacific Group, or I was overseeing Anthem, or even Len Asper that has the portfolio within Anthem, I would say like, let me see what I could find out. Is this sale really coming through for $40 million? Because I think they found a good. I don't know, what their position is, if they're profitable or not. They found good outlets, like of anyone of their size, like they're everywhere on like the Plutos and the YouTube Pluses and internationally and whatever. They found a good way to monetize things like that, but they're never going to come back around again to like Spike TV and like to sort of like reemerge in that way. So the best way to return on your investment is to sell, and what better time than now? Like, look, you can go to WWE and it's still fresh in their mind. We lost like the way we imagine that they work over there, right? We lost Ring of Honor. Like, let's not lose Impact now. Let's overpay for them, or Tony Khan, look, you have basically this alternative product. In some ways, like, again, there's not mean to insult any passionate TNA or Impact fans. In some ways, there's certain time periods that people are very passionate about, certainly AJ Styles' body of work and so on. But sometimes those periods aren't romanticized as much as Ring of Honor, but still Impact has, people could argue it, but it's still professionally produced from, if not all of it, most of its 20 years. There's so much content there, and you don't have to do a lot with it. The music that they've used and so on, maybe there's angles that don't stand up well to time, but there's nothing incredibly offensive, right? It came through cable television and so on, so you don't have to clean it up a lot. So in some ways, I think it's like equally valuable, but even like now that the market is set, potentially more valuable. So, you have Tony Khan, you have the company that owns Noah in Japan has been talking about like, hey, maybe we should book Madison Square Garden. I'm not saying that they're kicking the tires on any Northern American companies, but like that's a possibility. And then like, what other companies are there out there like Northern Pacific Group? I'm always surprised actually that you don't see a lot of private equity coming into pro wrestling. If you follow Sportico, John Wall Street, that sort of thing, like all the time, there's not only like huge investments in like mainstream sports, but like National Lacrosse League, all these things where it's like you would think about second and third tier. There's all this money pouring in, but we haven't yet seen it pour into pro wrestling in the same way that I'm aware of. So, I think there's the opportunity there. And like, if I was, how to say with Impact Wrestling, I would certainly like explore to see what's out there.
It's such an interesting push and pull that you could argue that valuation for a company that you're throwing out there. At the same time, like we've all got like our focus on these next set of domestic television rights for WWE that I think the outside world looks at as kind of part of that, sports bubble that continues to grow, and AEW that I think everyone is looking that they are due for a sizable increase as a non-WWE wrestling product that could enjoy some of these rights. That if you're an Impact, do we hope that maybe there's going to be a renewed interest in pro wrestling that is not labeled WWE, and we could land one of these giant game-changing deals, or just the idea that there are those two players and the rest of the wrestling ecosystem is just going to be at a much lower tier when it comes to being able to get those kinds of television rights fees?
I think they probably have a realistic outlook on it, having owned it and sort of seen the iterations that the company's gone through. They have it as their flagship, or at the very least their highest rated program that I'm aware of on Access TV. So they're able to utilize that, owning the company and the TV station. Certainly, if the right deal came along, then I'm sure they'd be open to exploring that. But you even look at WWE and we're still not sure what they're getting for NXT on the same network and in prime time when they get huge money on for Raw. So it doesn't seem like for secondary market programming, there's there's much of a market, but sort of like
which is a great comparison, Lavie, when we're talking about Ring of Honor in this whole thing. That if like AEW has established itself as an emerging brand, would that extend to an ROH? It's a great comparison with like NXT that is attached to the giant that is WWE.
Yeah, I'd like to say, not that I'd like to, but I would think no. But Tony Khan pulled a rabbit out of his hat for Warner, which was
totally.
So you never know with these things, but sometimes there's the type of deals that kind of keep you going and allow you to explore other things. I have no idea what the monetary value of it, but like be in sports, look how many years MLW has survived on there now, and BN has lost. Has contracted, even has lost distribution, and the ratings that Brandon had shared for MLW are in the less than had been 10,000. It seems like in the single digits at this point, but the program continues. So there's nothing wrong with a deal like that if you can get it to sort of sustain yourself, and then whatever lawsuits, whatever opportunities come up, where you can then explore opportunities. I don't imagine that's what Tony Khan is looking for. My guess would be that it's either a niche streaming distribution deal, or remember, at the very least, it was speculated on that Khan had two deals in hand, right, before starting AEW. We know there was TNT, but the other seemed to be Showtime, and that would make a lot of sense.
How valuable do you think, a company like Ring of Honor and its library is to, for example, a Showtime or a Warner Media in the grand scheme of things for an over-the-top platform? And can you see Tony maybe, fattening the deal a bit more by acquiring perhaps another library? Or is that the line of thinking that he should be thinking about right now?
So I think whenever there's a paywall, it has to be the type of programming that people are especially passionate about. And it can be a niche, but a large niche. And I think big time pro wrestling, or even like brand, like I think about WWE like 1A, AEW at this point like 1B, like even like if somebody existed like even a little bit lower than that, but they had the right talent, the right sort of feel to it that would attract people. I think that's very valuable because there's still this like land grab to have people sign up for your service and not others, and then they consolidate. Whole nother story. But look at all like the small pro wrestling streaming and OTT companies 5 years ago, and how many are left and who consolidated, right? But like if you can attract over 100,000 people to sign up for your service, that's a big deal. So I think, Tony, I think the really Impact is probably the major library and of value. I mean, there's a lot of niche ones that would be fun, but like I think that would sort of like complete his library to compete with WWE, and it would give a lot more hours to work with, and different ways you can sort of like mix things together. Look, you could tell not most, because a lot of it's for WWE, but a lot of CM Punk's story with going through Ring of Honor, a little bit, a taste of Impact, which is fun, and then you have AEW, so you could sort of like have more things to play with.
Lavie, I want to thank you so much for jumping on with us. We definitely have to do this again in the near future. But for those watching that want to hear more from you on the Business of the Business podcast, where can they listen to it and follow all of your work?
Sure. Thanks so much. So we're on all major podcast distributors, the Business of the Business. You can search it with my name or John Paz. We found out later there have been a couple other podcasts with the same name, including our friends at Mass Republic. But so, you can include our name too. Follow me on Twitter, Lavie Marg, LAVIE MARG. And if you want to check out Trump Mania, now that we're a couple years removed, kind of in retrospective, check it out on Amazon.
Well, we encourage you very much. Go check out all of his books. Maybe don't drop $700 on them. Hit the man up with a direct message, and maybe he can assist you with a more economical option. But Lavie, this was a great chat. I think this is stuff that people are really intrigued by. So it was great to pick your brain and discuss all of this.
My pleasure. Anytime.
All right. Lavie Margolin, everyone, from the Business of the Business podcast. So there you go, Wai. I think it's really interesting when you look at Impact that if you are sitting down with a streaming platform, television executives that don't have the emotional ties that a wrestling fan may have to the Ring of Honor library, and you're looking side by side, like that is such a big part to Impact. They've got like great wrestling content, but more so production wise, it's night and day compared to when you're looking at the older Ring of Honor footage.
It's true, though. I mean, I think Impact is a bit in a bit of a unique situation because I feel like so much of, at least from my perspective, Access's portfolio is centered around Impact content, whereas I don't think Ring of Honor played that big of a role in Sinclair's overall portfolio. So like you're trying to build a relationship with New Japan at the same time using basically your core Impact product. So is it even for sale? I'm sure for the right price, of course, anything is, but what else?
It has a larger ripple effect. You're right. Like it's, right. Sinclair is going to, this will not be any kind of hiccup for them when it comes to their programming. It's just filling in new content. Whereas when you look at Anthem's portfolio and a channel like Access and the Fight Network, like that feeds the other. So we're not really viewing Impact in the traditional sense of a wrestling company that, assessing profit and loss. It's delivering a value to many different streams within that business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But again, yeah. Well, it's a story that I'm sure will have a lot of ripple effects.
So coming out of Wednesday on Dynamite, William Regal actually took to Twitter and gave a public apology for going overtime and noted that he apologized to all of the participants afterwards. So a true man's man.
Yeah, honestly, watching the show, I think it was a bit obvious that his segment was probably a lot longer than anything else on the show because of how fast moving everything else was. But as a fan, I'd love to see that sort of organic, just kind of free flowing conversation that he seemed to have with the audience. So in my opinion, he didn't have much to apologize to me for, but I can understand, maybe being a bit hectic backstage and timelines and everybody's matches potentially getting cut because he went long. And with this being, essentially his first day on the job, setting an example by, taking some ownership for, taking up too much time. I mean, it was a classy move by the man. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's always going to, timing issues are always going to be a frustration if it affects you. But that's what they always say, is that if you're going to go overtime, make sure it's really great. That was, the This Is Your Life segment. That was like the big thing, was that it went way over the time, but it ended up doing a terrific audience, and then you get it's not as much of a negative. But a larger story attached to William Regal was noted in the Observer newsletter that came out today, stating that, this comes from the line that we heard on Wednesday from Regal, that he is not long for this world, and not really getting into like how severe, but like the Observer is reporting that, he has had like, notable health issues that he has kept private, but is going to go into detail about them next week when I guess he's already done an interview, or is about to, with Chris Jericho. So that will come out. So that's certainly concerning when you hear about that. And this is someone that, his 20s were a very rough set of years in his life, as he has documented.
Absolutely, yeah. And I guess it's a story that, I mean, maybe we wouldn't even have known about had he not done this interview with Jericho, and had he not been a part of this, I guess, recent, certainly like recontextualizes his run in AEW a bit differently. And I mean, it's disheartening to hear, but, I wait to hear what the exact details are.
Yeah, it's very vague, so I think it's best to just wait till he addresses it himself. One thing I just want to add here is that the 2K22 game that we talked about, which was a great interview on Thursday with Mike Straw, IGN put out their review of the game, and just a quick thing that they noted here. They got a very favorable review here, noting 2K games and visual concepts needed a win with 2K22, and while it's far from a complete ground-up rebuild, it's quite possibly the biggest leap forward the series has ever seen. The year off has clearly paid dividends. Virtually all of the major bugs experienced in 2K20 have been squashed, revamped. Well, it just goes on here about more of the specifics, but I would venture to guess that is kind of been from what I have seen today, like pretty good reviews for this game, that, as we outlined on Thursday with Mike, they really needed a big win here.
Yeah, it seems like it's good news. It sets the ground floor for sets the grounding, I should say, for continued development. So maybe 2K sticks around. I do want to point out, John, people in the chat room are letting us know that William Regal actually addressed the report from Dave Meltzer.
Okay. Well, please share it.
I have the tweet right here. He says, already, that's why I stay out of the rumor mill and gossip. I've just found out that there are things being printed about my health. I'm healthier than I've been in many years. I talked this week to someone about things that had happened to me in 2018.
Okay, well, I'm glad we got that clarification then from William Regal himself. So there you go. Regardless, I guess he will address that portion then in the Chris Jericho interview. Dynamite numbers, 945,000 on Wednesday night. They were first on cable. They were down 2% in viewers, but up 12% in the demo. And this was a night that, I mean, cable news continues to be very strong, but they were also ahead of both NBA games, South Park. So this was a very good number for Dynamite. They were up 30% in women 18 to 49, up 20% in female, and in 35 to 49 overall, but up 39% in women 35 to 49. So this somewhat mirrored the NXT pattern on Tuesday, where their female viewership led to the spike. And if you look at the overall viewership, the reason that it's down is because their 50 plus number, they had been averaging, I want to say like a 0.3. I've actually got the number here. They were averaging a 0.39 this year in 50 plus, and did a 0.33 this week. So that is what is dragging down the overall viewership number. But nonetheless, they were like their 18 to 49 number beat everything on cable on Wednesday night coming out of the pay-per-view.
Really strong result. Absolutely. I mean, the most staggering thing to me, in the first quarter hour, I believe they were over 1 million. And that means 1 million people saw Eddie Kingston wear WH Park's 4 Pillars t-shirt.
That's right. Yes. A big seller afterwards. And and we've learned a lot about the t-shirt industry.
Oh, yes, we have. By the way, everybody, make sure you get the shirt. I mean, everybody who listens to this knows, but make sure you're getting the shirt at store.postwrestling.com. It is the only place to get it. Do not let the spam bots fool you.
Tonight, SmackDown from Birmingham, Alabama at the Legacy Arena. On the WWE's events page, they are advertising Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey, though they have not announced either for any segments tonight, but presumably we will see them. They have switched the Zelina-Naomi match into a tag match, so we are getting Queen Zelina and Carmella against Naomi and Sasha Banks, which was the original WrestleMania match that has now seen the addition of Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley, and then Big E and Kofi Kingston taking on Sheamus and Ridge Holland.
Yeah, as payback for the ATV attack.
Ooh, that's right. We have a vehicular destruction from last week and possible revenge coming tonight in Birmingham. So there you go. That's happening tonight. And then Rampage is the taped show from Wednesday with Darby Allin against Mark Quinn, Mercedes Martinez taking on Jamie Hayter, Keith Lee versus QT Marshall, and the main event will see Shane Swerve Strickland against Tony Nese, as well as an interview with Scorpio Sky after winning the TNT Championship on Wednesday, with an appearance by the Hardys on tonight's show too.
All right, cool.
There you go. Are you excited, Way?
Yeah,
Friday
I am.
night.
I mean, it's Swerve's first match in AEW. That should be good. I'm a big Jamie Hayter fan, so seeing her in Mercedes, I think, would be interesting as well. And Keith Lee in action.
That's right. Some of the other events going down this weekend, GCW has a card in Atlanta that sees Nick Gage in action, teaming with Matt Tremont. They're defending the tag titles against Mance Warner and Matthew Justice. This is Mance Warner's first match back since his injury that he sustained last Halloween. So he is back. It's a pretty deep card for GCW. They've got AR Fox against Nick Wayne, Matt Cardona against 72-year-old Mike Jackson, Jordan Grace against Alley Catch, AJ Gray, and Effie. So there you go. That is the GCW show this weekend. UFC on Saturday night. The main event is Thiago Santos against Magomed Ankalaev. And Ankalaev is on this incredible streak. He is probably in that upper mix with a win over Thiago Santos, who has had, he bounced back in his last fight after 3 straight losses, including that relatively close fight he had with John Jones back in 2019. But Ankalaev is, he's a significant light heavyweight to be paying attention to. 16-1. He should be the favorite in this fight, and I think with a win, he will kind of be on that short list to fight because the next title fight is going to be Glover Teixeira against Yuri Prohaska, and Ankalaev could find himself in that championship mix by the end of this year after Saturday night. So there you go. That is what is happening this weekend. And Way, we are going to be back tonight with Rewind to SmackDown. So people can tune in live on this channel at 11:15 Eastern and catch the first 20 minutes or so of the show. That will be free for everyone. And then the entire show will be available for our members live and on demand at postwrestlingcafe.com as we go through SmackDown, Rampage, and whatever else is going down between now and 11:15.
I also want to draw everybody's attention to our recently released edition of the British Wrestling Experience, where Martin, Benno, and Andy reunite to discuss the latest in European wrestling, and Martin even has a special announcement about his future in podcasting. So do check that out.
Special announcements draw. That's what I've learned.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yes. And I want to promote that our own Wai Ting has just done episode 1 of the Roman Times, a 90-minute deep dive into the psyche of Wai Ting, captivating, beautifully chaptered. This YouTube, wonderful. I think we should steal that.
If you'd like to put the work into
I'll do it.
coding every single thing, then I'm more than happy to steal it. But yes, absolutely. My friend Roman, actually our friend John, our former jiu-jitsu teacher, Roman Krem, he has recently started a new podcast. If I could bring it up right here. Sorry, it's a lot of juggling because I didn't know we were going to talk about this. But
sorry, I'm throwing you a curveball here.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, but I recently did an interview with him, basically talking about my career in podcasting, and I think everybody listening to this, there I am.
Look away.
Look at all the graphics put into this. Oh my god,
dude! The B-roll he found in this was incredible.
He really went all out, finding
this guy.
everything. But yeah, it was a really interesting chat taking place right here from my living room, and it was just a very casual discussion about, I think, everything to do with starting up a podcast company, being a podcast full-time, podcaster full-time, and really a whole lot of things. We went about 90 minutes, so if you enjoy it, check it out by searching the what should you search for? Search for Roman Kremiansky on Twitter, or just go to my Twitter.
Go Wai's Twitter, wherever you would like, and give the man a subscribe to the channel. He put a lot of work into this. This was a very professional broadcast.
I'll put a link in the description for this show. How about that?
Okay, sounds good. All right, well, that's going to wrap things up, everyone. We are back tonight. Rewind to SmackDown. Look out for that. And also dropping this weekend. I mean, perfectly timed here. The Long and Winding Royal Road drops on Saturday with WH Park. The homework assignment for everyone is to go back to October of 1999, where it was Yoshihiro Takayama and Takeo Omori taking on the tandem of Kenta Kobashi and Jun Akiyama. So that one is going to be on the docket this Saturday for the Long and Winding Royal Road. Sunday is WrestleNomics Day, every Sunday at postwrestling.com. Brandon and Chris will be going through all of the latest business news. If you enjoyed our chat with Lavie Margolin, you will love WrestleNomics Radio if you are not already a follower of the show. So that is it. Thank you for tuning in to the Post Daily News Show.